Take a look at a map of the world. One thing immediately jumps out at you: the sheer massive scale of Russia. It's not just big, it's hauntingly enormous. Stretching across 11 time zones and 2 entire continents, Russia is the largest nation on Earth. It spans from the frozen, jagged coastline of the Arctic Ocean down to the sun-scorched deserts of Kazakhstan, and from the Baltic Sea in the west all the way to the Pacific Ocean in the east. It covers over 17 million square kilometers. To put that in perspective, Russia is nearly double the size of the United States or China. It's so big it has its own weather systems and contains the largest forest reserves on the planet. But here is the mystery that leaves geographers and economists scratching their heads. Despite having all that land, Russia is effectively empty. A staggering 80% of the Russian population lives on just 20% of its land. That means the vast majority of this superpower is a silent, frozen wilderness where you could wander for days without seeing a single soul. Why is it that in the wealthiest nation in terms of land, people are crammed into one tiny corner? Why has one of the world's most powerful militaries failed to conquer its own backyard? Today we're diving into the untold story of Russia's geographic divide. A tale of brutal winters, Stalinist prison camps, hidden gold, and a strategic emptiness that has saved the country from total destruction more than once. A tale of two Russias, the Great Divide. To understand Russia, you have to stop looking at it as one country and start looking at it as two distinct worlds: European Russia and Asian Russia. The dividing line is the Ural mountain range, and the contrast between the two sides is nothing short of shocking. European Russia makes up only about 23% of the country's total land area. However, this is where the heart of the nation beats. Roughly 110 million people are packed into this western slice. It's home to the capital, Moscow, and the cultural crown jewel, St. Petersburg. Almost every major highway, high-speed rail line, and industrial hub is located here. Then, you cross the Urals and enter Asian Russia, the legendary Siberia and the Russian Far East. This region accounts for a massive 75% of the country's land, yet it is home to a measly 20% of the population. In many parts of Siberia, the population density is less than 3 people per square kilometer. For comparison, New York City has over 10,000 people per square kilometer. In the east, you don't have neighbors, you have bears, wolves, and thousands of miles of taiga forest. But why didn't the Russian people spread out? Why didn't they go west like the Americans did in the 19th century? To find the answer, we have to look back at the very beginning of the Russian state. The roots of the West. History and soil. Centuries ago, Russia wasn't a giant. It began as a collection of small Slavic communities in the fertile plains of what we now call Western Russia and Ukraine. These early settlers stayed in the West for 2 very simple reasons: food and water. The western part of Russia features the Black Earth Belt. This is some of the most fertile soil on the entire planet. Regions like Kursk, Voronezh, and Belgorod are agricultural gold mines, producing 70% of Russia's grain, wheat, and sunflowers. If you want to build a civilization, you need to be able to feed it, and the West was the only place where that was easy. Furthermore, the West is home to the Volga River, the longest river in Europe. Historically, the Volga was the ultimate highway. It connects more than 11 major Russian cities, acting as a massive artery for trade and transport before emptying into the Caspian Sea. Life in the West was predictable. The climate was manageable, the land was flat, and the proximity to Europe meant access to modern ideas, trade routes, and technology. As the Russian Empire began to grow, it naturally expanded its power from this western base. But as they looked toward the east, they encountered a wall of ice and stone that changed everything. Siberia, the frozen fortress. When the Russian Empire finally pushed past the Ural Mountains into Siberia, they didn't find a land of opportunity, they found a frozen wasteland. Siberia is famous for having some of the most extreme weather on Earth. We're talking about temperatures that can drop to 60 C, 76 F. In a place like Yakutsk, the coldest city in the world, The ground is permanently frozen, a phenomenon called permafrost. You can't easily build roads because the ground shifts when the top layer thaws in the summer. You can't easily farm because the growing season is too short. And in the summer, the melting snow turns the entire region into a giant swamp filled with clouds of mosquitoes so thick they can actually kill livestock. Because of these brutal conditions, the East remained largely empty for centuries. But in the 20th century, the Soviet Union decided they were going to conquer nature itself. The Soviet experiment and the gulags. When the Bolsheviks took power, they realized that while the East was miserable to live in, it was overflowing with resources. Joseph Stalin and his successors knew that for the Soviet Union to become a global superpower, they needed the coal, oil, and minerals buried under the Siberian ice. But how do you get people to move to a place where their eyelids freeze shut? The Soviet answer was simple and brutal: force. Between the 1920s and the 1950s, millions of people were forcibly relocated to the east. Many were sent to the gulags, labor camps located in the harshest parts of Siberia. These weren't just prisons. They were the primary workforce for the Soviet industrial machine. Prisoners were forced to mine for gold, chop down massive forests, and build entire cities in the middle of nowhere with little more than hand tools and meager rations. The crown jewel of this expansion was the Trans-Siberian Railway. Completed in 1916 and expanded during the Soviet era, it is the longest railway line in the world, stretching over 9,000 kilometers from Moscow to the Pacific port of Vladivostok. It was a feat of engineering, but it still wasn't enough to make people want to live there. As soon as the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and the government stopped forcing people to stay in these remote outposts, a mass exodus began. People fled back to the warmth and the jobs of the West, leaving behind ghost towns that still dot the Siberian landscape today. The hidden treasure of the East. If Siberia is so miserable, why does Russia keep it? Because even though it's empty of people, it's overflowing with wealth. Siberia is arguably the most resource-rich region on the planet. Energy. About 80% of Russia's natural gas and 70% of its oil come from Siberia. This is the lifeblood of the Russian economy and its primary leverage over Europe. Freshwater Siberia is home to Lake Baikal, the deepest lake in the world. This single lake contains 20% of the world's unfrozen surface fresh water. Gold and diamonds, the Sukhoi log deposit in Irkutsk is one of the world's largest untapped gold reserves, holding an estimated 450 tons of gold. However, extracting these riches is a logistical nightmare. Drilling for oil in the Arctic is exponentially more expensive than drilling in the Middle East. You have to build specialized equipment that won't shatter in the cold and figure out how to transport it thousands of miles across a landscape with no roads. Most people living in the East today are only there for these high-paying industry jobs. Once they've made their money, they head straight back to Moscow. The strategic buffer. Why emptiness is a weapon. There is one more reason why Russia's emptiness is actually its greatest asset: military strategy. Throughout history, Russia's massive, empty backyard has been its secret weapon. This emptiness acts as a giant buffer zone. If an enemy invades from the west, they have to cross thousands of miles of punishing terrain and brutal weather before they can ever hope to conquer the heart of the country. We saw this play out in World War II. When Nazi Germany invaded, the Soviet army used a scorched earth policy. They retreated deep into the interior, burning everything as they went. The German supply lines stretched thinner and thinner. Eventually, the legendary General Winter arrived. The German soldiers, unequipped for the Siberian-grade cold, froze in their tracks. The Russian army, used to the conditions, launched a massive counterattack from the depths of the east and pushed them all the way back to Berlin. During the Cold War, the Soviets used this emptiness to hide their most sensitive assets. They built secret cities, nuclear silos, and radar stations deep in the Siberian wilderness, where they were nearly impossible for Western intelligence to track. What do you think? Could you survive a winter in the middle of Siberia for a high-paying mining job? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.